Grab your favorite beverage. It's time for the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast.
What's up, Fantasy Freaks and Geeks? Welcome to part one of the Week 6 Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. In one of my leagues, I was lucky enough to play against Amari Cooper, Aaron Jones, and the Eagles defense. I lost by like 85 points, I think. So to anybody else who was unlucky enough to play against any one of these guys who scored over 35 fantasy points last week, Michael Thomas, Aaron Jones, Amari Cooper, Will Fuller, Christian McCaffrey, Deshaun Watson, even the Philadelphia Eagles defense, all with 35-plus fantasy points in a half-point PPR league. Week 5 was wild. All these fantasy points, and Patrick Mahomes yet with his second straight game under 20 fantasy points. He only had 3 games last year where he had under 20 fantasy points. One was against Jacksonville, and they had by far the best defense in the league. One was in Week 17 when he came out of a 35-3 beatdown in the fourth quarter. So not looking good for Patrick Mahomes, man. What's going on with him? I know that offensive lineman stepped on his foot, and that can't feel good, but it's not. He hasn't been the same, and it's been 2 weeks in a row now, which is really, to me, the more surprising thing. Just one game like this, not a big deal, but 2 in a row, especially considering how much the Chiefs were trying to throw the ball last week. Anyway, we are going to do the Thursday night preview, the Giants at the Patriots, rematch of those 2 awesome Super Bowls, and then we're going to do all of the NFC home games. I think there's only 5 or 6 of them this week. Here on part 1, and then tomorrow night I'm going to record part 2, all the AFC home games. This week we're going to do something a little different. We're going to do the FanDuel and the 3-team parlay as a separate episode. Should be a quick little thing, and we'll do that either probably Friday night, try and get it out by Saturday. Give our guys a little bit more time to make their picks. So let's jump into it here. We're going to do the Giants at the Patriots. I just want to start off by pointing out how the Patriots, after winning the Super Bowl, they've played by far the easiest schedule in the NFL, which is not how it's supposed to be. Generally, the Super Bowl winner the next year should be what is one of the toughest schedules, and it has not been that way this year. So far, the quarterbacks that they've faced: Josh Rosen, Ryan Fitzpatrick, 2 Dolphins quarterbacks who did nothing. Against my Jets, they played Luke Falk. Then they get to go and play in Buffalo. They saw Josh Allen, who's a good quarterback, but he's still young. He threw 3 interceptions, got knocked out of the game, and in came Matt Barkley. Then last week, they get to play Colt McCoy on a Redskins team that is completely devoid of any talent. And now they get to play a rookie in Daniel Jones, who's going to be playing without his star running back, and Saquon Barkley, who's going to be out with the ankle sprain. His backup, Wayne Gallman, is going to be out with a concussion. Their best receiving option, Evan Ingram's out with an MCL sprain. And their best wide receiver right now, Sterling Shepard, is also going to be out with a concussion. So all I could say is this is going to be probably another one of these extremely ugly games. We saw last week it was kind of Sonny Michel's game to have, and I think this is another one where the game script is just going to be, we're going to be up by half and we can just run the ball all game. So it should be more touches for Sonny Michel. I think he should have another good game. The surprising thing with Sonny Michel actually last game was how he got 3 targets. He had 11 targets in 16 games last year as a rookie. That's less than 1 target a game, and yet this game he had 3 targets. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if they were just, if they're trying to maybe add another wrinkle to their offense or what's going on, but it definitely was interesting seeing that. and he had only one target on the season prior to week 5. So it's definitely interesting to see that. James White still and Edelman they were tied for the most targets. That's probably how it's going to be every week. Those two guys, and James White still had 6 carries. So he only had 6 games all of last year with 6+ carries. So this was a weird game for the running backs there, and I think it's going to be another game where the Patriots kind of just rely on their running backs. Even Brandon Bolden had 6 touches last week, which you're obviously going to see in a 33-7 game, but still surprising to me to see those 3 targets going to Sonny Michel. The Redskins had been allowing the 9th and 10th fewest receptions and receiving yards to running backs, so throughout the season they've actually been pretty good at covering running backs, coming out the backfield and running routes, yet the Patriots running backs caught 11 of 15 targets for 112 yards. So the Patriots don't really care what you do well. They're going to do what they do well. And one of those things is definitely throwing the ball to their running backs. So Philip Dorsett leads the Patriots in air yards. And with him missing last week with this hamstring injury, Josh Gordon led the team in air yards. He had 8 targets, the second most targets for him on the season. So if Dorsett's going to be out again, it seems like he will be. I think this is the game where we maybe see Josh Gordon, have that big game. Giants are allowing the second most fantasy points to wide receivers, so this could be his game. I think in my FanDuel lineup, I might try and get Josh Gordon in a couple of them because I think he's going to be one of those cheaper guys that has a really good chance of booming. Interesting little thing here for the Patriots. Also, they cut Benjamin Watson, so they had him on the roster for the 4 weeks that he was suspended. They didn't play him in week 5, and then they cut him in week 6. One of the many mysteries of the Patriots. But one last thing on the Pats, you got to think after losing 2 Super Bowls to the Giants, with Bill Belichick coming up in the Giants coaching staff with Bill Parcells. He won 2 Super Bowls with them over there. You got to be thinking they're tasting a little bit of
revenge
against this beat-up Giants team. Bad defense, an offense with a backup quarterback that's completely devoid of talent right now. So I think the Patriots are going to lay a whooping on these Giants. Golden Tate with 6 targets in his debut, only 17 air yards on those 6 targets. So he's obviously, he's just running those little slants and bubble screens and crap like that. You got to figure this week with all the other guys that are down, he's going to see not only more targets, but he's going to be asked to run, more routes that are down the field. So I think he's going to be another really cheap, good DFS play simply because of the volume. Like I said, both of the running backs for the Giants are going to be out. So if you're a believer in volume, then John Hilleman is going to be your guy. In a game last week, 28-10 loss to the Vikings, he only got 9 carries. Elijah Penny had 3. Wayne Goldman had 2. They kind of spread it around. So I don't know if they're going to, give him 10, 12 carries. I don't know if they're going to be in a position to do that, because the Patriots are probably going to put up 21 points in the first quarter. But, again, another probably dirt cheap guy that has as good of a chance to score a touchdown as any backup running back would that's getting this much opportunity here. So some cool options there for the Giants-Patriots game. I think also for that 3-team parlay, I was looking, and the cool thing about FanDuel Sportsbook app, you can take home or away teams over under. Last week I had the Redskins under. It was under 13. They only put up 7 points, so that one was a good hit for me. But I think I'm going to be looking at the Giants. I think when I looked at it earlier today, it was 10.5 points. So yeah, I don't think they're going to score twice. Moving on to the Panthers at the Buccaneers. Both Bucs running backs with 4 yards per carry last week against the Saints run D that the week before had shut down Ezekiel Elliott for 35 rushing yards. I think they're going to try and get that going again, because there was points in the game where they were running the ball pretty good. So the Bucs started off down 10-0 or down 10 points at halftime. The Saints made it 24-10 after their opening possession in the second half. The Bucs answered back with a nice 17-play, 10 of them being run plays. 17-play drive, made it a 10-point game again. Then after they forced a Saints punt, they ran the ball only one more time for the rest of the game. So I think looking at these two running backs, I know we've seen Chris Godwin, have a bunch of huge games in a row. We'll get to him, Mike Evans, with a really crappy game. But I think they really got to try and not get away from the run so easily, because these two running backs aren't playing all that bad. So 9 carries for Ronald Jones, 8 for Peyton Barber. It's kind of been going back and forth where, they split carries one week, and then the next week it's one guy's getting 12 carries to the other guy's 3 or 4. It's kind of hard to figure that one out, but I think they need to try and at least give those dudes a better chance at keeping them in a game. Another huge game for Chris Godwin, like I said. Second game in a row with over 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's got 6 touchdowns on the season. He's become their best wide receiver. I mean, Mike Evans with no catches on 3 targets. Horrible game. O.J. Howard also had a horrible game. I think you can go ahead and drop O.J. Howard. I actually did last week for who did I pick up? I think I picked up Jack Doyle. He's just not involved at all. It's pretty much Godwin and Mike Evans, and that's it. So, looking at the Panthers here, 2 straight weeks of Christian McCaffrey leading the team in targets. 4th game this year with over 178 total yards. 2nd game this year with over 200 total yards and 2 touchdowns. The guy's been an absolute monster. He's been worth anybody who drafted him first overall. He's been worth it. So it's kind of crazy. This little dude who's just come in and he's been so amazingly productive. He's used so much. A lot of people said there's no way he's going to be able to hold up to a full NFL season. And not only is he holding up, but he's getting more touches than a lot of other running backs. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if he leads the league in touches. It's either him or McCaffrey or Kamara. But DJ Moore with more targets in Week 5 than in Week 3 and 4 combined. He caught 6 of 8 targets for 91 yards. He saw 26% of the target share with Kyle Allen there. So good to see him get back into being, involved in the pass game and not, getting targeted 3-4 times or whatever it's been. Curtis Samuel, I was looking at air yards this past weekend. Curtis Samuel is number 10 in the league as far as air yards on the season. He got 6 targets last week and only caught half of them. So, anytime you have one of these guys that's targeted deep down the field, he's going to have a lower catch rate, unless his name is Tyreek Hill. He's going to have a lower catch rate than other receivers. So, it just takes 1 or 2 of those bombs to connect that he can kind of run away and not only hopefully get us a touchdown along with a big, 40, 50-yard catch. He hasn't had that big game yet, Curtis Samuel. Yet to break the 100 receiving yard game. Only 1 touchdown so far. And if it wasn't for his 25 rushing yards last week, he would have had the worst game of the year. But, like I said, he's getting those deep targets. And with Kyle Allen there, maybe when Cam Newton comes back, maybe those targets become a little more valuable. Kyle Allen has thrown on average 30 attempts a game in his 3 starts. Last week we saw DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey, and Curtis Samuel get 75% of the targets, and the other 25% of the targets went to a bunch of other dudes, one of them being Greg Olsen. And Olsen has been great in the 2 games that they had a good matchup against tight ends. Week 2 against these Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he had 110 receiving yards. In Week 3, he had 75 yards and 2 touchdowns against Arizona, who is the worst team against tight ends this year. The Bucs allow the 2nd most fantasy points to tight ends, so I think this is one of the weeks to play Greg Olsen. So again, another DFS player that's got a great matchup. If he sees the volume, I think he can pay out for you. Too many notes. Moving on here to the Philadelphia Eagles going up and playing in Minnesota. Dalvin Cook caught all 6 of his targets for a season-high 86 receiving yards to go with his 4th 110-plus rushing yard game, 27 total touches, also a season-high. Some people were kind of worried about the injury and then the ACL tear 2 years ago and the hamstring issues last year. Were the Vikings really going to be able to give this guy a true workhorse workload? And we're seeing it. Much to the dismay of Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, we're definitely seeing it. So Cook is still the man. If you look at the Eagles, they're actually giving up the 6th fewest fantasy points to running backs. So he doesn't have the greatest matchup here, but he didn't last week 2 weeks ago against the Bears, and he still played pretty well. So I'm not all that worried about Dalvin Cook. You're obviously going to keep him in your lineup. Kirk Cousins with his 2nd most completions on the season, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. Both of them went to Adam Thielen, who had his best game since his huge 12-catch, 200-yard, 2-touchdown Christmas Eve game against the Packers back in 2016. If anybody remembers that game, that was kind of Adam Thielen's breakout game. But so one of the 2 squeaky wheels got grease. Poor Stephon Diggs, 4th on the team in catches versus that horrible Giants defense. There's just no way that both of these wide receivers are going to be able to see their, what they were expecting, at least as far as targets going into this season with Dalvin Cook getting the amount of work that he's getting. So there's just no way both of them are gonna be that great. So I think Adam Thielen obviously has more of a connection with Kirk Cousins than it seems like Stephon Diggs does. So he's probably the one of the 2 that you'd want to hold on to. But I think if you can package Stephon Diggs with somebody else and maybe upgrade at receiver, I would definitely do it in a heartbeat. Looking at the Eagles here, the Eagles offense did not have to do all that much last week playing my pathetic, horrible New York Jets. The Eagles kind of coasted through it. The defense had 2 scores. They forced 3 fumbles. They had 10 sacks. It was pretty wild. Jordan Howard with 3 games in a row with a touchdown now. So he is definitely not one of these dudes that we need to see as a backup running back. He's definitely the starter there. He's definitely he's getting the touches. Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders both had 29 snaps in Week 5. They split right down the middle. Sanders with a slightly higher snap count on the year, but Jordan Howard is one of 9 players so far this season with 14 or more red zone carries. So yeah, maybe he's not on the field as much as Miles Sanders is because Miles Sanders is involved in the pass game more, but Jordan Howard is getting the more valuable touches, those red zone touches that you want. So keep playing him, man. I know the Vikings defense is really tough. They're allowing the 5th fewest fantasy points to running backs. So yeah, I mean the Eagles are going to use him. I can't believe it, but it does kind of seem like they have somewhat of defined roles for these 2 running backs. Yeah, Darren Sproles is still going to get his few touches a game, but it definitely seems like going forward it's going to be Miles Sanders getting more of the targets and Jordan Howard being used more on the short yardage goal line, 1st and 2nd down type of plays. Hoping for Deshaun Watson to return in this game. Eagles didn't really need to do much in the passing game versus the Jets, but they are going to need to do a lot more against this Vikings defense. They're great, allowing the 9th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. They're going to need him back. Hopefully he's able to go. We'll see what happens there. Something to definitely keep an eye on. Nelson Aguilar is not a number 2 receiver. He only caught 1 pass last week for 20 yards. He dropped the other 2. I don't think the Eagles can really count on him taking that next step that I think they were kind of hoping he would. They're just going to have to roll out there with Alshon and Deshaun and the 2 awesome tight ends that they have. All right, we got the Falcons against the Cardinals. Redbird versus Redbird. Matt Ryan with 300 plus passing yards in every single game this year, but yet they're 1-4. Devontae Freeman with another good game, good day catching the ball at least. What did he do? He caught all 5 of his targets for 40 yards and a touchdown. First touchdown of the season for him, actually. And Calvin Ridley had a great game. Nice little bounce back game for him. Caught 5 of his 9 targets for 88 yards and a touchdown. Unfortunately, Julio Jones did not have a great game. He does this from time to time where he only catches 3 or 4 passes for under 50 yards. In fact, Julio back-to-back games with under 6 fantasy points. While Mohamed Sanu with 9 and 10-point games in those 2 games. So they got a lot of players there. They got a lot of good players there. Even the Austin Hooper, their tight ends, seeing on average probably 7-8 targets a game as well. So they target their running backs. They use all 3 wide receivers. They use their tight end. In fact, they use both of the running backs in the past game. So you can't get discouraged by this kind of stuff if you're a Julio owner. Honestly, if you've been playing fantasy football long enough, you should know ever since Julio came into the league and he was playing with Tony Gonzalez and Roddy White, that he's not one of the most targeted wide receivers in the league. As far as the top echelon of wide receivers, he's definitely at the bottom of that rung as far as targets go. But he's got the talent, and you never sit him because the chance of having him one of those 250-yard, 10-catch, 2-3 touchdown games that we just saw Will Fuller and Amari Cooper have, he's got one of the best odds every week to do that, so you can't sit him. Austin Hooper with the matchup of the week here. I know Tyler Eifert had the matchup of the week last week, and he only caught 2 passes for 14 yards. He dropped his red zone target, of course. I played him in... Oh, no, that's the league that I dropped O.J. Howard. I picked up Tyler Eifert and did nothing for me. But even after only allowing 2 catches for 14 yards to Tyler Eifert, the Cardinals still allow the most fantasy points to tight ends, which is pretty wild in itself. So, yeah, play play Austin Hooper. Again, another DFS guy with a great matchup. If you're sensing a theme here, this is at least how I'm going to go about building my FanDuel lineup. Everybody can do it their own way, but this is one way of doing it. There's a chance, as far as the Cardinals go, there's a chance that David Johnson may miss this game. Apparently his back was having spasms, or it tightened up or whatever. He was going in and out of the game in the second half last week, and I think he missed practice today, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. Chase Edmonds, if he is to step into a full workload as far as a running back on this offense against this defense, can't really ask for much more. Falcons defense is really not all that great at anything. So Kyler Murray turned it up rushing over the last 3 weeks, 2 straight weeks with a rushing touchdown. Last week, the Falcons allowed Deshaun Watson to run for 50 yards, so maybe that's something that the Cardinals look at and they go, hey, we just saw the dude last week, kind of, use his legs in certain plays, so maybe the Cardinals look to do the same on a few plays. Chase Edmonds with 11 touches and a nice long touchdown. David Johnson with 20 touches and 150 total yards. 12 total running back targets. So if David Johnson is out, and that's something that the Cardinals love to do, is just dump the ball off. So again, if David Johnson's going to be out, you got to assume Chase Edmonds is going to see a good 14, 15 touches, I would assume. Maybe 6, 7 targets, 8 or 9 carries. Probably even more than that, to be honest. And Keyshawn Johnson, second on the team in targets last week with 7 in the absence of Christian Kirk. If Christian Kirk does not play this week, I think Keyshawn Johnson is another FanDuel cheap, play that's got a great matchup. The Falcons give up the most fantasy points to wide receivers. A combination of matchup and opportunity, I don't know, plus value. I don't know if you can really beat that when it comes to making a FanDuel lineup. All right, did I get to? Yes, I did. All right, cool. Moving on to the Lions at the Packers. Lions coming off of a bye. Packers coming off of that win against the Cowboys, in which we saw Aaron Jones explode for 4 touchdowns. He had 19 carries for 100 yards, added another 75 receiving yards, catching 7 of his 8 passes. With no Jamal Williams there and 26 touches in the game, I think against this Lions team, I think they're going to try and stay with that balanced approach and not try and force Aaron Rodgers to throw the ball 40 plus times. We'll have to see if Devontae Adams plays for this game. He didn't play last week. Geronimo Allison and Marquez Valdez-Scantling only caught 3 of 10 combined targets for 46 yards. If Devontae Adams misses again, these 2 wide receivers are going to need to step it up because this Lions defense really isn't all that bad. Giving up the 9th fewest points to wide receivers, 9th fewest points to tight ends. They're really not all that bad. So these guys have to pick it up if Devontae Adams were to miss. Last week without Devontae Adams, I thought we'd see a little bit more from Jimmy Graham, but the Packers were up so big they didn't really need to throw all the ball all that much. They just kept feeding Aaron Jones, and he just kept scoring touchdowns. So you're not going to get away from it if it's working. Like I said, Lions coming off of a bye. I think the Lions tried and do what they did week 4 versus the Chiefs when they ran the ball 33 times. Packers allow the 3rd most fantasy points to running backs, and they're in the top 10 as far as receptions and receiving yards go to running backs as well. So I'm excited for Kerryon Johnson in this game. He had a career high in carries in that week 4 game against the Chiefs. So, maybe they kind of look back at that formula, and I know the Lions lost that game, but, maybe they look at that formula and they kind of say, hey, we got to run the ball here. All right, last game of the I'm sorry, I got one more stat here. One sheet got moved from one game to the other here. The Lions allow the 4th most fantasy points and the 5th most receiving yards to running backs. And if the Packers have to rely on Aaron Jones again, I think they're okay with that. Back-to-back weeks with 7 and 8 targets. Both are career high in targets plus 19 carries. So, I don't think there's any reason for them to get away from Aaron Jones if these Green Bay wide receivers don't step it up in Devontae Adams' absence here. Kind of all over the place here. Sorry, guys. As I drink more beer. All right, so 49ers at Rams, last NFC home game of the week. With the bye week, I thought Kyle Shanahan would take some time and try and get Greg Kittle more involved after 3 weeks of only like 55 receiving yards a game, no touchdowns. And this is another game where we didn't see the offense have to really do all that much in the passing game because of how dominant they were running the ball. And the defense played really well as well. Besides Kittle and the running backs, I'm not sure if there's any of these wide receivers that are all that startable. Not sure if, honestly, any of them are even worth rostering right now. They're just, they're not seeing all that many targets. They don't need to really do all that much because the 49ers are just beating the hell out of teams running the football. I was down 35 points going into Monday Night Football with Matt Breida to play, and I kind of already going into the game. I was kind of like, yeah, this game's already over. And then he started the game with 92 total yards and 2 touchdowns, and I was like, damn, he might actually have a shot. But he finished with only 130 yards and 2 touchdowns, so I think I still lost by like 5 or 6 points. Sucks, but Monday Night Football is great. You always get those games that come down to one player, and you become the biggest fan of that one player for that one game, and then next week it's like, yeah, whatever. Looking at the Rams here, Cooper Kupp continuing to dominate targets with or without Brandon Cooks. We saw Gerald Everett jump into a 22% target share with no Brandon Cooks last week. Had more targets even than Robert Woods. I do think it was a matchup thing, though. Seeing what Vance McDonald did in week 2 against the Seahawks, 2 touchdowns on 7 catches for 38 yards. And also the Bengals tight end in week 1, 9 catches. The 2 Bengals tight ends, 9 catches for 93 yards. who, head coach in Cincinnati, Zach Taylor, who was working under Sean McVay last year. So I think there's, something in that offense where if they see something, they're gonna target their tight ends, and that's what the Rams did last week against the Seahawks. They still lost the game by 1 point. It was an awesome game, though. I'm not sure if 11 targets is really something we can expect to see from Gerald Everett week to week, whether Brandon Cooks is, if Brandon Cooks is out. But if you're short on tight ends, we got 4 teams on bye. Maybe he's not the worst guy to pick up and throw in there. 49ers defense looked awesome on Monday night, though. 5 passes defensed with 2 more interceptions. 1/3 of Baker Mayfield's passes were defensed. 2 forced fumbles on top of that. So their defense is looking pretty awesome. But I don't know if they've really been tested by a good tight end so far this season. Not saying that Gerald Everett is a Pro Bowler, but the 49ers do allow the 3rd fewest points to tight ends. But like I said, besides Vance McDonald in week 3, who was only targeted twice, they hadn't really faced any good tight ends. So, maybe Gerald Everett is not all that bad of a play. Like I said, in a bye week where you might need somebody to fill in. 49ers are in the top 7 for receptions and receiving yards to running backs. So if Cooks misses, I expect to see Gurley's targets go up a little bit. 5 targets last week. Maybe this is the week to pay up for Todd Gurley in DFS. Maybe they, some of those targets that did go to Gerald Everett last week, maybe those end up going to Todd Gurley since, this week they're playing the 49ers, who right now are allowing the 3rd fewest fantasy points to tight end. So we'll see what happens with Todd Gurley. 15 carries last week as well, so a nice 20-touch game for him. Definitely scary in the beginning of the season when we were only seeing him touch the ball, 10, 12 times. But it seems like they've come around and he's getting those touches. So that does it for part 1 of Week 6. Make sure you tune in for part 2. We'll give you all the AFC home games. And then later in the weekend, we'll give you the FanDuel lineup and the 3-team parlay of the week. So as always, may the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents.
You have been listening to the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. For more episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Beers and Bruisers is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach TV, or your favorite podcast service. Beers and Bruisers is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. To find out more about this and other great shows on our network, visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com or download the free HC Universal Network app today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gaming operates a national problem gambling helpline network. Contact them today at 1-800-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to drink responsibly and always look for your man downfield.